Have you seen this? Then you already know there's no big red dog. And this is why I didn't see this movie. Apparently there are several more other good reasons.
I have a little red dog.
Yeah, I know, and he sucks. Welcome to Have You Seen This? If you've seen this movie, then you already know it has no big red dog, which is why I didn't see it. Apparently there are several more reasons.
Welcome to Have You Seen This?
The world's only podcast about obscure, overlooked, and misbegotten media.
All discussions will be spoiler heavy.
You have been warned. Look, Jen, I'm sorry about that. So, the reason
Fuck you.
that... So, I saw the name Clifford, and as a child at the time, I only knew the big red dog. And I'm like, oh, is this like an unfaithful adaptation? Like how sometimes, they'll get like the IP for something, and then they'll just like go off the rails with it, because the poster has a doghouse on it. And I'm like, where's the fucking big red dog? But no, it's...
All the posters for this movie are wretched.
Yeah, well, it was the 90s. It was the time for that. But yeah, that was the only reason that I didn't see Clifford, and apparently I missed out on just a harrowing laugh riot of a movie.
This is an odd one. I believe in Germany it is called Clifford, das kleine Schüssel.
Oh, he's a pretty big schlussel, if you ask me.
Which I think means the little monster.
Yeah, okay.
Which is
fitting.
Putting too fine a point on it, but This is a weird one. And the reason that we're covering it is because apparently it has a massive cult following, including respectable Hollywood heavy hitters.
Yeah.
I mean, like Nancy Meyer, Nicolas Cage.
Right.
Nicolas Cage once complimented Martin Short on a flight. Like, went up to him and was like, you're a genius. Because of the scene where Clifford acts out Charles Grodin's character drinking the Tabasco sauce.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he has a very sort of vaudeville demeanor in this.
Big theater kid energy.
Yeah, ooh. And whether you're on board with that or not, I think really determines whether you're going to enjoy this movie or not. I brought it up because a friend of mine who I game with, like, I mentioned the podcast, and she's like, oh, you have to do Clifford. Because apparently she loves that movie. And when I see her again,
legion.
Yeah, when I see her again, I'm going to have to ask her why. To put this in context, me watching it now, and it could be like a lot of movies where you see it at the time and you're just at the age. Like if you sat, an adult one of us down to watch like Space Ghost Coast to Coast, you'd be like, I get it, but I'm not laughing. Or something like that. Because there are a variety of comedies like this, like huge disasters, flops, movies that like comedians love. To name two, there's there's a friend of the show who is a talented and prolific comedy writer, and his favorite movie is Dirty Work. Dirty Work is not a good movie, but
you just pissed off so many people who love Norm Macdonald. Right.
No, I didn't. I'm not saying Norm Macdonald isn't funny, because all of our listeners, whether they know it or not, are like quoting, they have like 3 Norm Macdonald quotes that they'll just like bandy about without even realizing it. Like there's some things that like he has put out into like the comedic ether that no one else would have done, and like they became a thing now. Adolf Hitler, what a jerk, like, for one. But like
you say that quite frequently, as I recall.
Right, yeah. It's one of those things, like how, Patton Oswalt's Failure Pile in a Sadness Bowl like dictated pop culture critiques throughout like the 2000s.
For better or for worse.
Yeah, it's one of those things that whether you know it or not, it is highly influential regardless of how successful it is in maybe broader pop culture. So bringing up Dirty Work as I do, like that movie didn't hit with me. Like, I get why people like it, but I'm like, it's not a good movie.
I mean, it's no Hot to Trot.
It is, no. And yeah, like, you can understand if you describe it in Hot to Trot terms. But moving on to another beloved cult flop, Cabin Boy. There's another one.
Oh, I love Cabin Boy.
See? That's what I'm saying. Like, some of them hit and some of them don't. And I think for us, it's Cabin Boy. You know, for other friends of the show, it might be Dirty Work. And certainly for Clifford, it has its fans, which it just makes it even all the more inscrutable.
It's apt that you bring up Cabin Boy, because that was a movie which, like this one, just kind of dropped like a turd in a punch bowl when it was released.
That's being generous, but yes.
Right. This came out in 1994. It had actually been shot in 1991. The reason for the gap actually wasn't like, oh my God, this is a disaster, let's put it on a shelf and
it's like, we need
do.
more of Chris Elliott.
The reason Clifford sat on the shelf for 3 years was because Orion Pictures, which had produced it, was undergoing a bankruptcy.
Yeah, they kind of pulled a United Artists around the same.
Which is interesting because they were founded by executive refugees from United Artists.
They keep trying to make art.
Well, one of those people was Mike Medavoy, and he also co-founded Orion. And in his memoir, he says, Orion championed films that the other studios rejected. Throughout the 80s, a time when movies needed to be sold on the basis of one line of high-concept advertising copy, we backed a string of thought-provoking films, including Platoon and Amadeus and Clifford. He doesn't say Clifford. I just
I believe it's implied.
I added it because I did a search in his memoir, and there is no mention of Clifford.
That's a shame, because I mean, if only he had said that, like maybe it would have a wider audience, the audience it deserved.
Apparently, at the time when they were, I guess they had put together a work print and were screening it for the execs, Medavoy reportedly said, "This is going to make $100 million."
Right? Yeah. Maybe it's like a tax write-off or something, or like reported as loss.
Yeah, and it's possible that it was that belief in the high concept film of the 90s,
right?
Where it's like it's a grown man playing a little boy. It can't lose. It's so simple,
right?
Except it did.
Yeah, and that is, I mean, in my experience, I can really only speak to my experience, is that I didn't see it because I was disappointed that I'm like, it doesn't sound like a faithful adaptation of those Red Dog books. But but the thought of Martin Short playing a 10-year-old and everyone just rolling with it, that does sound like a funny high concept. Because I want to see a diminutive comedic actor just being a kid.
Right.
I'm not happy with the results, but apparently I'm in the minority. Well, at least among cult fans. I mean, I'm definitely on the same wavelength of the theater-going public, who I think were after something else. They were after I think a conventionally funny movie with like a plot and a story and characters, the sort of things you go to movies to see. Yeah,
well, this came out in theaters and basically died a death and really only found its audience on cable TV and VHS or DVD or whatever.
Home media, yes.
Yeah, and the reason I specifically called out Cabin Boy is because Cabin Boy was one of those movies which, because it was regarded as such a stinker at the time, the mass opinion of it kind of trickles down your consciousness and you're like, oh, this movie is bad. Okay, yeah, like, it's in Roger Ebert's book. I hated this movie or whatever.
Yeah, the customer's always right, just right, go with the wisdom of crowds.
Sure, but sometimes you catch one of those and you're like, oh, wait, everyone was completely wrong. And that's a huge reason why we do this show. We cover a lot of movies where the critical and cultural opinion was off. Like, they just weren't ready for it. And I think that was the case with this one. I'm not going to say, oh my God, 5 stars. Nicolas Cage was right. This is the funniest thing I've ever seen. I did get some laughs out of it. It's just that, I mean, I probably laughed more at Cabin Boy, but it was the same thing with Cabin Boy where it was like, everyone has spent years telling you how much this movie sucks, and then you see it, and you're like, that's fine. I mean, it's stupid, but...
Yeah, you're like, this movie is, like, crappy, but it's not bad. Like, it's like,
yeah.
I think it's funny. Like, it's a crummy movie that I find hilarious. And I think really... Well, the question is, like, which side do you fall on in terms of, I guess, your perspective on Clifford? Because if you're part of the theater-going public, like I was getting to earlier, and in that article that you mentioned, there are like when they go to test screenings, people are just like, "I hate this movie. Like, who the fuck do you think you are?" And I would hope that Clifford died at the end. And
I mean,
and that is, there's people on a particular wavelength of what they're going to see the movie for. And if they're going to see it as a movie, just as a generic movie, I don't give a shit who's in it. I don't know who Martin Short is. I don't care. I want to see something funny where it's like it's a mean little kid doing stuff. But then they watch it and they're like, well, this is no problem, child. This is
that really the high watermark of
right, exactly.
Child
yeah,
movies.
this is kid is nowhere near as charming as Dennis the Menace.
The existence of Problem Child is the whole reason that Martin Short had the title role, because this started out as a script about a horrible child that would be played by a child, but Problem Child was made, a decent amount of money. I mean, it had like 2 sequels at least.
At least, yeah. I mean, that's straight to video at any rate.
Yeah. So the thought of the filmmakers was, well, why not do something just out of left field? And that is why they cast Martin Short, who was about 40 at the time, as a 10-year-old boy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and this is the high concept sort of hat on a hat, where it's like, it isn't just, it
really is.
Yeah, because the idea is it's the bad seed, but a comedy, which is already a high concept, because you're like, oh, it's an evil kid, but, it's funny. But then on top of that, we aren't just having an evil little kid, we're having an adult as the evil kid. So I think that's the point where, or at least the way that they seem to approach it is like, that's where you lose the audience, which is funny because I'm on board with that. I'm like, I want to see an adult play a child and see like how far they can take it. Like how much can you make me buy into this ridiculous premise of... And
as it turns out, quite a bit. But
right. Well, for some.
Going back to Martin Short, the second reason why we're talking about this film is because a couple or 3 weeks ago, and
the discourse.
Lord forgive me for referring to Slate, which, as we all know, rhymes with bait.
Right.
But they published a piece called Why We Keep Putting Up with Martin Short, and a bunch of people got like super mad about it on social media. So, hey, good job, Slate. Still doing your thing after all these years. And I read the piece, and I don't have a outstandingly strong opinion about Martin Short. I mean, I've been aware of him since I was a child because, how many times have I seen Three Amigos?
Yeah, I know Ed Grimley, I know Three Amigos, and it's great to see him again in Only Murders in the Building. Episode 3 come this fall on Hulu.
Yeah. So he's definitely in a career upswing right now. So I read the piece, and I was just like I read this expecting it to be some kind of assassination. The way people were reacting, that it was going to be like, Martin Short sucks and he should kill himself or something.
Yeah, it's like, what's with this guy? Ugh.
And the most pointed that he gets is, he says, I know that I'm not the only one who finds Ed Grimley, who finds, indeed, nearly all of the over-the-top characters that Martin Short has played in his long career unbelievably annoying. And I'm like, I can see that because he does play incredibly annoying characters.
Right. Yeah, that's true.
He's not wrong. And, you can read this piece and be like, I like the guy, but whatever. But people reacted like he had gone on social media and said he was going to kill Martin Short's pets.
Mm-hmm. But that is the point that I'm making about the audience's approach to the movie. Like, either you're going there just as Joe Public being like, I want to see a funny movie about a kid terrorizing grown-ups, and then there's the other audience, which is like, what the hell is Martin Short doing playing a 10-year-old? And that is the audience that this movie resonates with. The Slate article is Camp A. Like, he's the public being like, why do we put up with this actor who, like, all his comedic roles are just these annoying man-children? And then there are other people being like, oh my God, Martin's doing the annoying man-child bit. This is awesome. Like, he's so irritating. I'm here for it.
Yeah, like, if you look at, like, an Ed Grimley sketch, I looked at some of the sketches that were linked in the article, one of which was an Ed Grimley sketch, and I was like, it was like a 6-minute sketch. I think I watched like 3 minutes of it. I was like, yeah, I remember Ed Grimley. The one that I did laugh at was, and I think it was from SNL, it was the synchronized swimming sketch, and I don't even remember the name of the character that Martin Short plays.
Oh, yeah.
It's just,
like, he's not a very strong swimmer. Morris doesn't swim.
Yeah. It's just like a guy who kind of can't do stuff.
Yeah.
And he has like a synchronized swimming act with Harry Shearer, and Martin Short meanwhile is in like the inflatable vest, and he's got his little swim
like his
cap
water
on
wings, and like the nose
swim
plug.
goggles, and then you have Christopher Guest in the sketch playing like a sort of proto Corky St. Clair. Mm-hmm. So hey, I'm sold, right? And
right,
it's so odd because this is SNL. SNL sketches are always like a very hit or miss. Like, they can really drag.
You don't say.
And it's like, okay, so the bit is that they're synchronized swimmers. Mm-hmm. That's funny, I guess. But just Martin Short being interviewed by, in this like pseudo-documentary format, and just being a weird guy who says weird things. Like, I was cackling.
Yeah, because he's the sort of like, he's so... no pun intended, in over his head as the synchronized swimmer, where it's like, you have no business being here. What are you doing?
Right.
But he plays it with just like such tenacity, where like he isn't good at doing this, but he's gonna keep trying, and you're like, well, okay, you do you.
And he made that into a whole recurring character, which is what people do on SNL. You get a recurring character, and then you just beat it into the ground.
Yeah, that's how you know you've won at Saturday Night Live, when you have a catchphrase that like people mangle at the water cooler the next day.
Mm-hmm. Gumby, damn it, etc. Right,
yeah. Not just that character, but yeah, speaking of SNL, like I don't even remember the name of the character, but he just had this one like really it wasn't Lovis's Pathological Liar, although that's another thing where it's just like, yeah, that's the ticket. See, there's your catchphrase. Fucking SNL. But it was this guy is always like just like this sweating, like he's got like the flop sweats, and I just remember one where it's like the interviewer, and it was probably Christopher Guest, being like, why are you being so defensive? He's like, I'm not defensive, I'm not being defensive, you're the one who's being defensive. And that's the thing that's funny about these characters, is that they aren't just a normal wacky character. They're just weird, and
deeply weird.
Yeah, and that, I think that Martin Short is playing outside what you're expecting of just like a weird character to be. It goes that much further, and going that much further, you're gonna lose some people, and I think that that's just what happens. But you see that, and I hate doing this because I know I repeat myself on this dumb show a lot. But I know that I've said that thing that I heard once before about, how do you make an audience laugh? And that is you dress up an actor like an old woman, and you have him pretend to fall down a flight of stairs. How do you make a room full of writers laugh? You push an old woman down a flight of stairs. And it's that thing, because it's like, it is going like so much further and weirder. And you see a lot of that in comedians talking about other comedians' work, where in that article you sent, where it isn't just Martin Short pathologically playing desperate, annoying characters because, for whatever reason, like he gravitates toward that, or he responds to it, or he just enjoys it. The thing that I didn't even know is that Charles Grodin, who in any role is just a guy who's just over it. He just had enough of your shit and doesn't want to he doesn't want to deal with it. That is all an act. That is all a character. Anyone who's worked with him says Charles Grodin is great, warm and kind and giving, but he thinks it's hilarious to play characters who are just I'm not doing this. This is a stupid, terrible idea, and you're an awful person, and I really couldn't be bothered. And he thinks that's funny, but you're like, if you're a normal person, you're like, what's funny about that? And be like, well, ask Chuck. He gets it. He's doing it to entertain himself.
So basically, you've been doing a Charles Grodin bit your entire life, but sincerely.
I would just say I'm deeply in character, and if you paid attention, maybe you might know something.
See?
Yeah.
There it is. Yeah.
Right. That's the point that a lot of people, I think, get lost in this, in that you can do a character that normal people in the audience are like, well, I just don't like this kid. And, maybe Martin Short is going to be like, yeah, that's the joke. He's an awful person, and you should feel uncomfortable being around him. And you're like, yeah, but I just want the character to die. I'm wishing death upon a child from your movie. I hate this movie. And I'm sure the people involved are like, yeah, is that hilarious? So it's being on just a different wavelength of what you're expecting out of your comedy. And I think that since a lot of comedians feel this way, it has to be a comedy thing. I mean, I didn't like the movie Clifford. I think Martin Short is funny, but I hate this movie.
I think that 1994 audiences were not ready for this.
It's possible, because, what is it riffing on? It is comedians being like, I think this goofy thing is really making me laugh because it's so strange. But, yeah, if you put it in front of the audience, they'll be like, I don't know what to make of this.
Well, I think that in the 90s, audiences were less willing to go along with truly bizarre, tasteless premises. Mm-hmm. In kind of the pre-South Park, pre-Adult Swim era.
This was no Tom Green.
Right.
There was thespian.
There was a certain amount of bad taste that people would put up with. I don't know, going back to SNL, Dan Aykroyd playing Julia Child, cutting herself and bleeding out.
Yeah, or the Bassomatic.
Yeah, that's really pushing it. And there were enough people in the audience in 1994 who was, when confronted by an adult man playing a boy, are just like, what the fuck is this shit? It isn't just it didn't work for me. It's like, what the fuck?
Right. Not even being bemused, but being mad about it. Why did you do this?
And the way that people talked about this movie, at least in the, we'll say the media, it was it came across as a disaster like Battlefield Earth, on a scale like that, which is why when I watched it and found that it was fine and I laughed a few times, it was just oh, this is what everybody was so mad about. And I'm saying that as someone who is not part of the Martin Short stan crew, even though I have nothing against him. He does make me laugh sometimes. I do remember him on an episode of Law and Order SVU playing a self-professed psychic, trying to insert himself into an investigation. And I remember watching that episode and just being like, wow, he is so fucking good. I am really creeped out by this character. And the way it goes from this is kind of just an eccentric guy who maybe is a little overbearing to oh no, there's something wrong with this person.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing, is that maybe most people just get lost in the, hey, I'm just doing a bit, I'm just doing a character. Because that's the thing too, Steve Martin's been doing a character for what, 40 plus years. That is the arrogant comic who's not very good. That's pretty much been his thing. But the irony is that you actually have to be a really good comic in order to sell that. And so it's kind of the same thing with Martin Short, where he's I'm going to play this I guess desperate theater kid, because he gets that character and he knows how to to make it move the way he wants. But you have to be like you also have to be a consummate performer to pull that off. So it isn't just that he is, I don't know, desperate or cloying or what have you, but he's like, I've decided to play this character, and this is what he's like. It's, you know, the same thing with Charles Grodin being like, I think it's funny to just be someone who's had it with you.
Yeah, and there was a quote from Steve Martin in a retrospective in Vulture on the movie Clifford, in which they went back and talked to a lot of the cast and filmmakers and fans of the movie. And they did quote Steve Martin, who is billed as comedy legend and Martin Short frenemy.
Yeah, their like cutting banter is great when the two of them work together.
Yeah, which is a huge part of why Only Murders in the Building is like such a fun show.
Yeah, given Three Amigos, I wonder why they didn't invite Chevy Chase.
We all know why they didn't invite Chevy Chase.
Chevy is
Everyone
not
knows why
acting. Yeah.
Why don't you go ask Dan Harmon why they didn't invite Chevy Chase? And the quote from Steve Martin is, I can give you a quote about Clifford if you want. Ready? Here it is. I've heard of it.
Again, yeah, that like, just I don't know how you'd even describe that.
Savage.
Yeah, not damning with faint praise, but like condescending, I suppose.
Yeah, that sure was a movie.
Yeah, and that's Steve Martin being like, you are nowhere near, like you are not even remotely on my level. Now let me put an arrow through my head.
Hey Tim, let's get small.
Let's get real small.
Let's just finish out the show with quotes from much funnier people.
That is so much easier than like trying to hone my craft and find my own comedic voice. I'm like just
fuck
gonna
a bunch
say
of that.
I'm gonna say things that other people already know are funny and be like, hey, I'm funny too.
This is now the Family Guy recapping hour. We're going to start with season 1, episode 1.
Yeah.
How's your Peter Griffin impression?
Oh, I'm as good as any other white guy, basically. He was as good as any other white guy.
Yeah. Right. Something, Stewie.
You want to hear my Christopher Walken?
Brian, etc.
Right, yeah,
Lois.
It goes on like that. I don't have anything prepared.
So, I'm not surprised to hear that you hate this movie. I was preparing for that, but
well,
I'm
you
not.
can be of two minds about it, and I think that
Sure.
just getting to what drives those minds is the reason that people pay so much money to listen to this show.
Hundreds of dollars.
Right? Yeah.
Thousands.
I quit my second job because of this.
You weren't even doing your first job.
Right? Yeah. So they don't know yet.
You're like, I might as well quit then.
Yeah, I'm quiet quitting.
So
You hit us in the news, folks. The quiet
So Clifford. Clifford from 1994. Beloved comedy to many.
Yeah.
Which I get because Lord knows I like my share of dumb shit. Some of which I've talked about on this very show.
Were you going anywhere with that?
I thought you were going to chime in, but
I mean, I can.
see, this is why we're not Steve Martin and Martin Short, everyone.
Steve Martin Short. They can just combine him into like an AI chat bot.
They just form like Voltron.
Yeah. Oh, there you go.
Something for everyone. Where does Selena Gomez fit in? Is she the pilot?
Yes.
Selena, get in the Steve Martin Short.
Get into Steve Martin's shorts.
You have to pilot the Steve Martin Short.
You have to sit in the giant robot.
You have to sit in the robot.
Right. That was
That's
thing
what those shows are about, sitting in the robot.
That was the crucial, driving narrative of Robotech, was that they would have these giant robots.
Robotech was about people sitting in robots.
And the characters would sit in them.
Yeah. Neon Genesis Evangelion. It's a show about sitting in robots.
Mm-hmm.
Am I wrong? No.
Just hanging out in the robot.
Yeah. Shinji, get in the fucking Ava.
Right.
You stupid little shit.
Yeah. So
who is more loathed? Shinji, Ikari, or Clifford? That is the question.
Oh, that
the most. Let's start a list of most loathed boy characters.
Let's post a poll on Twitter, and then we can see how many blue check Nazi bots we can get responding to it.
Sweet. I'm definitely not at all sick of seeing Happy Merchant memes.
And speaking of numbskull basement dwellers who don't get comedy or don't understand art. Like, you can go on and see people flipping about Duchamp on Twitter. Like, that's reading that article about comedians just like, and film cultists singing the praises of this awful movie. I'm like, am I the chud in this example? Like, you're starting to feel, to put in the online parlance, like, are they gaslighting me? Are they being like, oh no, this movie is hilarious? Like, I don't think it's funny. Why do you think it's funny? But
I'm
on the other
flashing
hand,
back to our Wet Hot American Summer episode.
right? No. I mean, that movie isn't funny. Like, don't get me wrong.
Wrong.
I
Wrong.
Okay. Well, if they'd put some jokes in it, maybe I would have felt differently.
Well, you and the 2 or 3 other people who feel that way can have a little party about it. But for now, we're talking about Clifford. Well, another movie you hated.
Right. I wouldn't say I hate it. I mean, like, I did wish for the death of a child towards the end of it.
Oh, yeah.
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 I think that, like, the problem is that the problem is the disconnect between the intent of the filmmakers and the expectations of the audience, which I don't know if I can define it more broadly than that.
Explain.
No, it is that the audience is. If I'm going in there, I'm there to see, like, the story, and I'm there to see what happens. And this kid is awful and hateful, and you're like, this kid really sucks. I think that in a just world he should get his comeuppance, but no, he's just a shitty child because Martin Short just enjoys playing this awful child so much, and Charles Grodin is really good at playing off him as this beleaguered, seething adult. And the movie just kind of keeps doing that. And if you're there to see that, you think this movie's great. But if you're like, I want to see a normal movie that's funny, then they're like, oh, we didn't set out to make that movie. We made a movie that we thought was hilarious instead. Sorry you didn't realize that. Sorry you didn't notice that our movie is funny, you dumb public theater-going audience. And so I hear that from comedians, like people who understand comedy and are, comedy professionals. And I'm like, well, what am I not getting? Like, what do I not see here? Like, I feel like I'm looking at, Duchamp's urinal and being like, this isn't art.
The whole thing with Clifford is that just straight up, some things are going to be hilarious to one person and just like anti-humor to another. And this might be a less extreme case, but maybe they could go in the same bucket. Something similar to, for example, something we've talked about twice on the show, Nothing But Trouble, where it is obvious that Dan Aykroyd thought that shit was so funny.
Yeah, they're not phoning it in, whatever the hell it is they're doing.
Yeah, like there is great brio and passion put into Nothing But Trouble. And while Clifford is definitely like a simpler production on the surface, there was quite a bit of trickery and tomfoolery that went into it. First of all, kind of doing a Darby O'Gill and the Little People thing, sort of, with Martin Short to make him appear as boy-like as possible. There was obviously effort put into the Dinosaur World ride at the end.
Yeah, it is intense, but I mean, to what end?
And I appreciated that. I was like, no, yeah, that's a very good evocation of like that kind of ride.
It is Chekhov's dinosaur. Because
Stefan.
Yeah, because if you're there like to accompany this character on their journey, if you're there like, I want to hang out with Martin Short and see him be this irritating character, then at the end you're like, yeah, finally the protagonist gets what he wants. He gets to go to Dinosaur World, and all these pesky adults that have stood in his way by trying to like maintain their careers and relationships and other dumb bullshit, have finally fallen by the wayside and he's gotten what he wanted.
There's got to be people out there who are like actually on board with Clifford the whole time, where they actually like want him to succeed.
That can't be possible because he is a psychopath. Like, he is every every just like immediate instant gratification of a child that just like ratcheted up to 11.
Well, and it isn't even just that he's impulsive and just like seeking pleasure to the exclusion of all else. It's also the fact that he's incredibly manipulative and harmful. And one thing that did get a big laugh out of me right up front was when we're introduced to Clifford, who is on a plane with his parents heading to Hawaii. And when you take one look at his parents and you're like, oh, okay, yeah, it's one of those children, because the father is ready to snap. That's Richard Kind playing the dad.
Good old Richard Kind.
Jessica Savage is his mom, who is just a drunk. Like she's like obviously,
yeah, and that's a funny choice.
Yeah, like obviously drinking to cope. She is really, both of these people are on their last nerve.
Yeah, because you've just met this kid and you hate him.
Yeah, and then it isn't just that the kid is overly enthusiastic and grating. Then he starts mocking his father, saying that he's going to have a stroke. And as if that weren't enough, he starts like pulling a face to be like,
yeah, making like the stroke face, yeah.
And you're like, Jesus Christ.
Yeah, this is
fucking kid.
This is probably the most child-free movie that we've reviewed.
Oh yeah, it really is.
Because this
like,
is, yeah, this is how they describe it. They'd be like, see, I told you. Because throughout the entire movie, like, if they wanted to play it a different way, the thing of it is, like, at no point can you, like, hit Clifford. You can't, like, arrest him. You can't abandon him. You're like, this is my flesh and blood, and I'm responsible for this little miserable shit that I would love to strangle. Not a parent myself. It's still palpable.
It's like the lady in the airport who scolds Richard Kind for yelling at his son, causing him to explode on her, which is extremely mean and uncalled for, but also very fucking funny. Right.
Because if you met this kid, you're like, yeah, this kid sucks. But he's afforded this sort of like leeway where it's like, this movie would have been 5 minutes long if, like, it were, I don't know, the 30s or something, and Richard Kind just like backhanded Clifford until he started crying, and then that was the end of the movie.
If Clifford had ended up as the boy in the box.
The boy in the box?
The boy in the box was a famous true crime case, I think, stretching back to like the 40s or 50s, of a dead child found in a box by the side of the road. And I think they only identified the victim a couple of years ago via DNA.
Oh, and it was just him and like a plastic dinosaur. They're just like, this fucking kid. I cannot with this child anymore.
And everybody heard the identity of the kid, and they're like, oh, that kid. Yeah, that kid sucked.
Oh, yeah.
He deserved it.
I mean, I know you shouldn't speak ill of the dead, but yeah, fuck that kid.
Man, that kid sucked.
Oh, yeah.
This reminds me when we talked about Wood Chipper Massacre, and you were just like, man, this fucking kid is gay.
Yeah, that's like IRL Clifford. Like, it's just such an irritating kid, and like, I know you're just like this, wormy little theater kid, but yeah, you get on my nerves. My doll don't like you.
I feel like go 10 years in the future, like if you'd made this movie in 2004, you could have cast this movie with a child, and you could have made the kid be just a real piece of shit, and whoever took the Grodin role could just be incredibly hateful to this child, and people would have been, again, post South Park, people would have been on board with it. And maybe even if it had been like a grown man playing a little boy who is also just a piece of shit. But again, 1994, people weren't ready for this.
They weren't. Well, I mean, no one did anything to Clifford about it. So about just like the way he is.
Yeah, and it does clang a little bit that they've written these bookends for the movie, which are kind of like a redemption arc for Clifford. Right.
Those felt unnecessary to me, but I mean, given how poorly the movie was testing, they had to try something.
I guess it's interestingly that those bookends include not only a very young Ben Savage, the uncanceled Savage, as of this recording. There's also a small role for a young, I forget his real name, a young shifty shell shock of Crazy Town.
I have no idea who that is.
Do you remember that song Butterfly?
No.
Come, my lady, come, my lady. It's very stupid.
Okay.
That was Crazy Town.
It's a shame I missed out on that.
Not really, no. I mean, it was no Informer by Snow, but...
Oh, man. If only. Yes.
Licky boom boom down.
I know that because of Mystery Science Theater. So no Big Red Dog. That was the reason I never watched it. Although at the time, I don't know, maybe I would have been a cult fan of that if only they had gotten the name right.
Were you really that big a fan of Clifford the Big Red Dog?
It's the only Clifford I know in pop culture, with the exception of maybe Cliff Clavin.
Okay, because I feel like even if you had been the right age for Clifford the Big Red Dog, you'd been like, what the fuck is this shit?
Well,
like, I got Robotech. I got G.I. Joe.
That was my problem with it. I'm like, they didn't even show the dog in the trailer. Are they just like taking a minor character from like the book and then they're making it about him? And then the dog is just like, perfunctory to the story? No,
well, apparently, like many years later, they did make a Clifford the Big Red Dog movie.
Yeah, but by then I had aged out of it, and so I don't know, just wrong place, wrong time. It's rough.
You were like 17 or something in 1994.
I wish. No. But yeah, that was my only point of reference, and that's the only reason I didn't see it. Not that it's interesting. No one cares.
Yeah, and this was back when you were seeing movies, because, you did go see Wagons East or whatever.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that would have been later than that, though.
I guess so.
Yeah, I think that had Richard Lewis in it.
I don't know off the top of my head when Wagons East came out.
It was before 9/11. I know that.
Just the fact that I know about it is hilarious, but whatever.
Yeah, that's the burden of knowing me.
Yeah, well, it can't be helped. But you know what can be helped, Tim?
What is that?
Is the fact that I'm getting a little bit thirsty.
Okay. Well, yeah, normally when you're doing these shows, you have a big glass of rocks that you clink directly into the mic.
Yes, while you sort Legos directly into the mic.
If you'd like me to stop doing that, perhaps I can follow your example.
You know what, Tim? I'm actually glad that you brought up the ice. Because when it comes to adding things to your water, we got something that's pretty good. It's called Liquid IV.
Okay.
And it's the #1 powdered hydration brand in America. Their hydration multiplier is the one product you're missing in your daily routine. Use it first thing in the morning before a workout, when you feel run down in the afternoon, after a night with friends, or on long flights. Or if you're recording a fucking podcast.
Yeah, and you just get dry mouth. I mean, I can't be expected to drink water all day. I got places to be. I have bottomlessly terrible movies to watch. And with all this sobbing that I do afterwards, I become quite dehydrated.
That's true.
What better way to rehydrate with just not just the boring, awful problem child glass of water. You want the kicked up one. You want the Clifford version of water, and that is with Liquid IV.
Liquid IV comes in all kinds of flavors, like strawberry lemonade. One that I like very much, pina colada.
Do you like getting caught in the rain as well?
No, and I don't like making love on the dunes of the Cape, but I do like Liquid IV because honestly, I have been trying to hydrate more lately, and I like how hydration these days is now like this baton death march of water drinking, where it's like, no, you gotta get the big plastic jug.
You must consume 2 gallons of water per day.
Yes, and you have to be pissing completely clear by 3 p.m. or you're not doing it right. And I'm like, oh, that sounds wonderful.
Yeah, you're gonna die soon.
Yeah, but there's an easier way to do it. 1 stick of Liquid IV and 16 ounces of water hydrates you 2 times faster and more efficiently than water alone.
You know what I like? I like pina coladas, and I like vitamins B3, B5, B6, B12, and vitamin C.
Those are some of my favorite vitamins.
Yeah, well, and by vitamin C, I meant the ginger wrapper, but...
Wow, she's in Liquid IV?
I don't think she's in much of anything. It was just kind of a, hey, I'm a redhead.
That was good enough for you, though.
Yeah, that is good enough. I'm telling you.
But is it as good as Liquid IV?
Apples and carrots. Apples and oranges. Apples and gingers. God damn it. Apples and oranges.
Well, Tim, we got something special, not just for you, but for the rest of the audience. Our audience of real people. Real flavor, real hydrating. Get 20% off when you go to liquidiv.com and use code HYSTPOD. That's HYSTPOD at checkout. That's 20% off anything you order when you shop Better Hydration today using promo code HYSTPOD.
Vitamin C Music.
At liquidiv.com.
And go to YouTube and find more hits by Vitamin C, the musician.
liquidiv.com. Don't touch those Legos, Tim.
All right, fine. I'll just have my fruit bar instead. You know, you don't need to use my audio when I'm not talking.
Tim, it's just Bants.
Okay.
It's just Bants, bro.
Well, I want to do a good show. I don't know why it's important now.
I didn't know you cared.
Yeah, of course I care. That's why I'm so upset all the time.
But you know what?
It's my character.
Now that we're hydrated, thanks to Liquid IV.
Hang on, I gotta go pee.
You're gonna be pissing Seaberry.
I have the sweetest pee, and it is only because I'm a diabetic.
Excuse you, pre-diabetic.
All right, hey, you know, post-diabetic, whatever.
He's working on
I'm
it,
the
folks.
spectrum. Yeah.
But anyway, Clifford.
Yeah.
Did we talk about the plot at all? I don't think we did.
Why bother? It's an annoying kid who wastes everyone's time, and then he gets to see the dinosaur at the end. It is Martin Short does a bunch of grating shit for 90 minutes.
It is funny because, you know, everyone got so mad at that Slate article that I mentioned. And if the first thing that you watch with Martin Short in it after reading the article is Clifford, you think, like, you know what? Maybe this fucking Slate troll had a point. And the whole time you're watching, you're like, okay, yes, that's the point. The point is that this kid should make you homicidally angry. And that is part of the appeal, because for me, like, Martin Short is not the star attraction, even though technically he is. He's right in the title. For me, it's really about Charles Grodin, because I laughed so hard at the tiniest things that Charles Grodin was doing, even if it was just like his eyes darting to his boss's hairline.
Right. Yeah. That's good.
Like, I'm like, how do you, like, move your eyes in a funny way just in like a couple of seconds? And it's so funny. Or the moment when you see his affection for Clifford just curdling and then just turning into just pure unhinged hatred.
Yeah, and I have to go with that jazz comparison again, which I know I've tried it out before, but it's like, if you just take something where it's like, yeah, I like music, I listen to, you know, Vitamin C, I like all kinds, and if you take him to a jazz club and where you're like, oh, this guy's really good, like, this is the guy, like, this is, you know, like, hey, you seen that movie Whiplash? Like, you know, he's that good a drummer, he's that good on, you know, a fucking trombone, I don't know. But then you sit him down and you're like, how long does the set go on? Like, it's fine. But, like, to someone who's a fan of it, is like, you do not understand, like, what is happening on stage. And I think most people just don't. Like, I'm here to see a movie about an annoying kid, but it's the people who are, like, in comedy, they're like, oh, he's doing the this and that. No, like, the way that the two of them are, like, improvising this whole scene. Like what you're saying about, like, Charles Grodin, where he's giving all these, like, really subtle performances where it's like, when the guy is seething mad, like, he doesn't like blow up, he gets, like, quieter. And so these are all choices that, you know, someone who takes their craft seriously is making in order to deliver a certain kind of performance. And I think that, like, if you're there to pick up on it, then you see the movie and you're like, oh, this is great, I really appreciate what they're doing. But if you're there because you're like, I want to see a comedy, and this one has Martin Short in it, it's going completely over your head. And I think that's why audiences are like that. You know, it's just these sort of, like, you know, seething mass of moviegoers being like, why isn't your comedy funny? Like, where are the jokes?
What the fuck? That guy's like 45 years old. It doesn't even make any sense. You know,
Yeah,
recently,
but, hey, listen to the jokes he's not telling, man.
a few weeks ago, there was a video of Thelonious Monk at like a jazz festival. And I can't, not being musically trained, I can't really describe what he was doing, but, he was taking a solo and he was playing notes which to the unsophisticated ear were slightly jarring, like they were quote unquote like wrong notes, but played in such a way that even a dumbass like me knows that, oh, he's doing something.
He's doing
something different. And I'm not a jazz aficionado, but I was like, oh no, like, I get it. He's playing like
I see what he's going for.
He's playing like a different kind of solo, but there were just dozens of replies that were just like, well, this sounds really bad. This sucks. It sounds bad. And I was like, well, I guess like the hundreds of thousands of people who enjoyed Thelonious Monk's music and artistry were just wrong. And you, guy on Twitter with a blue check, definitely know what is good music and bad.
Yeah, you're a guy on the internet with a hot take. Let's listen to you. Oh shit, I think I just undermined our podcast.
Uh-oh. And we just blinked out of existence. But
and Tim disappears in a cloud of logic.
And a lot of what people were calling out in the, for example, the Vulture oral history of the making of Clifford, like they actually talked to Nicolas Cage. And he was one of the people saying, like, it's really just about those scenes with Charles Grodin and Martin Short, like, playing off each other. And in fact, Grodin did improvise quite a bit in those scenes. I think one of the most quoted lines where he's like, just look at me like a human boy. That was something that he came up with on the spot.
Yeah, which is the quintessence of Clifford.
It sort of is, because the line is extremely funny, and then there's a cut to Martin Short kind of milking the close-up, like doing that weird Clifford face, and it's kind of like
being a not normal kid.
Yeah, and it's kind of like, oh, okay, all right, okay, please stop now, please cut away to anything else. And I remember pretty recently there were ads on, I don't know if these have been on in a while, but there were ads on Pluto TV advertising Clifford. And the
big red dog?
Oh Christ, Tim, shut up about the fucking dog.
It's the only point of cultural reference that I know.
Apparently.
Yeah. He's a dog and he's big.
Dog.
What else do I have to say?
Well, I'm glad you like the doggy so much, Tim.
Yeah, if you like dogs so much, why don't you enslave one?
Is that what I did to Reggie? Yes. Oh, yeah, because he works so hard.
I mean, he didn't really have a choice in the matter.
Every day you find a new way to troll me, Tim. It's really something.
It's all part of my act.
On Pluto TV, the scene that they showed from the movie was him visiting the cockpit and then getting the idea that he was going to like force an emergency landing on the plane. And it's a particular look that he does when Clifford has just thought of something just like extra psychotic that he can do. Like something that will really hurt a lot of people around him. And I admit, like in the ads, I was like, okay, that's actually funny. Like, because you're like, something fucked up is going to happen to that plane.
Yeah, something wacky is going to happen.
But I found that as he repeated it through the movie, I was like, yeah, okay, I get it. Yeah, all right. Okay. Okay.
You aren't uncomfortable enough.
I guess not.
Yeah.
But it is that weird space where you're like, where you really are like, yes, I understand the premise. I'm just not exactly laughing my ass off here, except when Charles Grodin is on screen.
Okay, so you're more of a Grodin stan.
I guess. I don't know. Like, I'm not even a Grodin stan. It's just that, like, what else have I seen him in recently? Ishtar?
All right, well, you also like Ishtar. I mean,
I liked it more than you did. Let's put it that way.
Okay, I mean, that's low praise, but
I have this working theory, and I don't know, like, maybe, like, I think it definitely needs more work, but I have this theory that you don't vibe that much with American comedy.
That could very well be it. I mean, I don't know if I necessarily grew up on. I mean, I watched Saturday Night Live until the point where it just looked like a school play.
Sure.
And like that was pretty much, my touchstone of it, which is why, I understand pop culture stuff, but that's entirely possible. I mean, I do watch a lot of British stuff, and Red Dwarf is very formative, along with Monty Python. I'm your basic bitch Brit com guy.
Yeah, like it's not like a perfect theory, but that's my theory.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I thought you were gonna go something much worse, where it's like, Tim, I think that you have some brain disorder that makes you like this.
Well, I'm the expert on brain disorders.
That's true. You have really embraced that as a character.
Yes, it's a character.
So, yeah. Yeah, the whole thing about being like really
careful,
flustered and inarticulate. Yeah. I like it. For once you're there. You're ready. That's great. See, and this is what it was like on set and in the screening room watching Clifford. Meanwhile, our audience of, that could fill a an advanced placement classroom.
Yeah, like when
what's it all about?
I guess when those test screening cards were coming back, like you mentioned earlier,
yeah,
you'd get, and I believe you pulled that from an anecdote in the Vulture article where it was like you get a card that said "fuck you," and then you get like 2 cards later, it'd be like, "This is incredible. This is amazing."
Yeah, this is brilliant and hilarious. Which is like that Vulture article is great because it makes me want to watch the movie. What doesn't make me want to watch the movie is the movie and my memory of it. So
yeah, honestly, the movie is like I said, because it had been so elaborately built up as like the dumbest piece of shit of all time. Like watching it was kind of like, yeah, okay, because
real ish.
I don't know. A lot of times, I think that's just a me problem because I'm so often out of step with what other people think is good or bad that like I almost don't even have a calibration for it anymore. Like for my friends, I'm pretty good at I can recommend a movie to someone usually if it's a close friend.
Yeah.
I don't know what like regular people like.
Fuck them. Who cares what regular people like? That was also in the screening room of Clifford.
Yeah, but that's the thing with this movie is that it's like I'm like, yeah, I know, like I'm not just writing this off immediately because of the conceit of Martin Short playing a child.
Yeah, regular people are listening to podcasts about movies that are like currently in theaters. We are not that podcast.
We are not normal, folks.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah. Third base.
Right, yeah. And the other salient point that, Martin Short himself makes is that a lot of these movies that are obscure, you find like, you kind of have like an ownership of it because it's like no one else wants to like, wants to champion this movie. It's like you feel like, it's kind of like you're with your shitty dog. Like no one else loves this dog. And this dog sucks and people have returned it, but you're like, no, this is my dog and I love him. I'm going to take care of him. It's the same way that like, I feel about like Hudson Hawk or Fishmasters. Like Fishmasters was on after Saturday Night Live and it aired in like 2 markets, but like no one else knows or cares about the show, which is why I love it. And I think what the article is saying, or, what Martin Short is saying in the article is like, if you found something that is like so obscure and unloved, you're just going to like, hold that to your chest and like, just like, be like the super fan for it because it is a movie that like no one else knows about. Like your parents don't like it. It isn't talked about positively in pop culture, but you're like, no guys, like this thing that I found, like this thing is mine. And I'm going to make everyone else know how much I love this thing. Speaking of which, if you are a patron at the $5 level, you can join our Discord, and we have a channel where we talk about the role-playing game Traveler, which is a 2d6 sci-fi outer space adventure that really didn't get any love between, I want to say, 1987 and 2006.
Long story short, if you like movies in the show and you know what the acronym TTRPG stands for, why not come on over to the Discord?
If that Venn diagram is basically a circle.
Well, they're in the Discord right now.
Right, yeah. And that's great. Yeah, it's good talking about sharing things that other people don't like that, are obscure enough that I can see how fans of it became such, fanatics about it.
By the way, Reggie's going to haunt you when he dies.
Well, how much more of a nuisance could he be at this point, really?
Oh, you'll find out.
Is he going to die soon? Have you set a date?
You're like this is like when Richard Kind is yelling at Clifford at LAX, and that lady's like, "What a terrible thing to say to that sweet child." People will see a picture of Reggie and they'll be like, "That's a terrible thing to say about that adorable dog."
Yeah, although you wouldn't get halfway done with that sentence before he just started barking frantically at you.
Yes, little murder pup.
Yeah, he sucks.
I'm gonna start calling him Clifford.
Clifford the little red dog.
Oh yes.
Yes. So yeah, we talked a lot about a different array of comedies that are beloved by comedians but not the audience at large. Cabin Boy, Dirty Work, Clifford. Reading this article and feeling gaslit about Clifford really had given me an opportunity to reconsider what I think is, good comedy and bad, regardless of taste. Like, what is it that people are bringing to comedy that is new and inventive? And Bob Odenkirk seems to think that they're funny enough to put them on air, but I will not go to bat for Tim and Eric, not under any circumstance.
Yeah,
so that's where I draw the line.
I'm
open-minded about Clifford, but
yeah, I'm also much of the same mind as you as about Tim and Eric. It's like, yeah, I get it. I'm not laughing, but I get it.
Right, yeah. Maybe there's a Gen Z that can send us that Tumblr essay explaining the joke. It's I get the joke.
Yeah. Another thing that I saw on social media was, I don't even remember the band, but it was a multi-piece band with
it was OK Go.
They had a horn section, and at one point the singer and the people in the band did a coordinated dance together with very exaggerated facial expressions, and I was like, okay, there's nothing about this that I like. You couldn't pay me to go to this show. Other people seem to really like it. That's nice for them. I'm not even going to make fun of this stuff because it's hey, obviously this is their shit. Right.
I just don't get what the kids are into anymore.
100 Gex.
Oh, is that who it is?
I don't know. You think I know?
Right.
I listen to the Alan Parsons Project, Tim.
Yeah, how's that project coming along? Have they released any of their results yet?
The data is very interesting. I have high hopes for...
Yes, but interesting though it may be, is it statistically significant how interesting it is?
I'm not a musician.
I guess we leave it to Alan Parsons and the important research that he's doing.
The Alan Partridge Project.
Ha ha! See, I'm just saying what other comedians came up with. Steve Coogan, you can write your own jokes. It's allowed.
We'll get there someday.
I'm sure he's much nicer than that. Not to himself, though, because, where do you think that character comes from?
Well, yeah. What a twat.
Right. To put another way, the point that I've been trying to wedge into this episode about, maybe just not getting it, because I don't get Clifford. There are fans who do. They know something that I don't, but I can at least appreciate that the people who enjoy it, I think, they're not so different from normal people like Jen and myself, if I can include you in this. Because, Jen, what do you and I do? We watch terrible movies.
We really do.
Right. And you and I, to pull an old episode that recently got the Riff Tracks treatment, I think we both highly enjoy Truth or Dare or Critical Madness.
That is a delightful movie.
That movie is unhinged as all hell. And it's not the only one that we've covered that we're like, this movie is garbage and I love it. It's that same thing that Martin Short was talking about, although maybe he left out the garbage part. But though I may not appreciate Clifford in the way that its legion of lunatic fans do, I can at least understand that they like it for the same reasons I like the god-awful movies that I love.
Yeah, like, I bet that not everyone in the Clifford-loving group would also enjoy the movie Things as much as I do.
Right, yeah, that, which is inexplicable.
Yeah, I mean, you do have to be a little bit deranged to like that movie, but hey, all I can be is myself.
Yeah, so in the same way that I don't understand, like, I am in a way, that completely normal person who, for whatever reason, donated $5, thank you, to listen to this episode, but they're like, I'm not on board with what Tim and Jen are talking about. How can they waste their time, watching B-movie TV obsessively as they do, watching, like, getting all their cinema from Pluto TV and Tubi? Like, what normal person does that and be like, well, it takes all kinds.
Also, how dare you say that the 1973 musical version of Lost Horizon is a bad film?
Did I say that? No, I just declined to watch it.
No. I'm saying that was one of the people who didn't get the show.
Oh, okay. Yeah. What do they know?
Well, yeah. I mean, just reading that comment, I was like, yeah, our show is not for you, sir.
Oh, right. Yeah, that guy. But he kept listening. That was nice of him.
Same person who I think misgendered me.
Well, I mean, it's an easy mistake.
I guess so.
Yeah.
I do have very masculine affect.
Terrifier, though. Woof.
Yeah, that I don't get. Like,
right,
I get Clifford, I don't get Terrifier.
Yeah, you gotta, I don't know, I'm just, well, it's like I was mentioning on the Discord, because I watched X.
Oh, the Ty West film.
No, it was the website formerly known as Twitter.
You wouldn't watch that. Come on. Don't kid a kidder.
Yeah, no, it's true. It's too horrifying. Yeah, but like I watched X and I watched the prequel. To pronounce it as Mike Nelson does, I watched the prequel, Midwestern diction, Pearl, or I guess Pearl. No, yeah, I watched that and then like horror fans are getting something out of this, but I just want to say, like, horror fans, I think, would be better served by branching out to perhaps other genres, because it calls out things and you're like, oh, I recognize this from like Texas Chainsaw Massacre, but I'm like, I don't know. My thought of it was, if you wanted to watch a movie about, I don't know, generational suffering, like, you can watch the White Ribbon.
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah,
and that is a really good
movies.
time.
Yeah, that's a fun movie.
Yeah.
I mean, like, if you want a movie that's about a I don't know.
Now, there are some people who have said, half in jest, but kind of not, that Clifford is actually a horror movie.
I can see that.
Yeah.
Well, it's not a kid's movie.
I did feel extremely uncomfortable watching it.
I just felt pervasive rage throughout the whole thing.
Yeah,
like,
that's a kind of discomfort.
Why hasn't he killed this child yet?
Yeah.
This, young little person in his care. Why hasn't he, like, locked him in a basement? I mean, I kind of start to understand. I'm like, if you want to make a horror movie out of it, I'm like, oh, that's how these things happen. It's a parent who's just wholly unsuited to taking care of their awful child. And like, yeah, that's how you have, kids tied up in basements and,
Jesus.
people who've, like, have been living under a bed for 7 years, shit like that.
Yeah. Or,
real comedy material.
Yeah, like reading posts on r/am I the asshole and realizing how many people just have profound contempt and loathing for their own children.
Yeah, not everyone's cut out to be parents. So if you feel that way, you'll probably enjoy Clifford. I
mean, I knew that he wouldn't actually die at the climax of the film on the Dinosaur World ride, but you're like, God, can he just get, like, maimed a little bit?
Or maybe like, I don't know, have like major like brain damage or something, so like he's just not him anymore. That would be fun. To have that happen to a kid.
That would be a pretty good like balls out ending where he's just severely debilitated at the end of the movie and is thus very pleasant.
What was it, Rose Kennedy?
Yeah, Rosemary Kennedy. Although she came out that way.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
Maybe that's why they lobotomized her, is because she was as annoying as Clifford. God, that's terrible.
Just speaking through a plastic dinosaur. Someone might say that what we're doing right now, isn't funny. And to that I say, Clifford is currently streaming on Tubi.
I'll show you not funny, you son of a bitch.
Yeah. Look, Jen, I'm sorry.
Fuck
about
you.
That.